So imagine you build a piece of software back in 1994.
Okay, 1994. The dark ages of the internet.
Right, exactly. A fully functional medical database. And it works perfectly. I mean, you have complete first mover advantage here. This is decades before anyone has ever heard of WebMD, right? Long before the smartphone is even like a concept.
You're basically sitting on an absolute gold mine at that point.
Exactly. You are. And the obvious next step, the classic Silicon Valley playbook step, is to patent the underlying logic, aggressively scale it, seek a ton of venture capital, and get incredibly rich.
Right, that's the dream.
But instead, you just pull the plug. You actively stop promoting it entirely.
Wow, just shut it down.
Yeah. And the reason why? Because you realize that your brilliant invention is actually terrifying people.
It is the ultimate subversion of that whole tech founder narrative.
Oh, totally.
We are so conditioned to revere that that move fast and break things mentality, right? So when someone actually stops to consider the psychological wreckage their technology might cause, it almost doesn't compute for us.
It completely flips the script. And honestly, that brings us right to the core of our deep dive today. We are exploring the 40-year journey of one intensive care and pediatric physician, Dr. Kadiyali Srivatsa.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a massive, honestly fascinating stack of sources surrounding his life and his creations.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover today.
We do. We're looking at clinical case files, dense legal judgments from the UK regarding whistleblower retaliation, the actual technological blueprints for his artificial intelligence triage system, which is called Dr. Maya, and perhaps most unexpectedly, the ancient Vedic philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita.
And to truly understand this story, you really cannot look at those elements in isolation.
No, definitely not.
Like if you just look at the surface, you might just see a disgruntled former National Health Service doctor building a medical app.
Right, which would be totally missing the point.
Exactly. But if you dig into the mechanics of what he actually built and what he endured, you realize we're looking at this incredible intersection.
Yeah.
You have the modern antimicrobial resistance crisis, so the very real impending catastrophe of superbugs. You have the brutal bureaucratic machinery of institutional retaliation. And weaving through all of that, you have this profound spiritual framework regarding duty, ethical restraint, and detachment.
Yeah, and the central question we have to answer today for you listening, the real mystery at the heart of all these documents, is about intention.
That's the core of it, intention.
Right. When we look at Dr. Srivatsa's creation of these AI health tools and his relentless, very public, very costly battle against massive healthcare institutions, we have to ask what is actually driving it.
Right, is it ego?
Exactly. Is this the story of a doctor driven by ego? Is he craving recognition or, return on investment, industry awards, and validation because he feels slighted? Or is he driven by Dharma, the conscience-led ethical duty to protect his fellow human beings from harm, even if it costs him absolutely everything?
Well, to even begin to answer that question of intention, we have to look at his behavior before there were any massive battles to fight.
Yeah, we have to rewind.
Exactly. We have to go back to that 1994 scenario you just described. This was the genesis of what he called gotosurgeon.com.
Right. Let's really set the scene for you listening. 1994, the internet is in its absolute infancy.
Most people don't even have a dial-up connection yet.
Exactly. But Dr. Srivatsa was already, digitally pioneering. He took an entire comprehensive database of illnesses, tests, diseases, and drugs, and he programmed it onto a Cyan PDA.
Oh, wow. A Cyan PDA.
Yeah. And for those who don't remember, Cyan was one of those early, really clunky handheld personal digital assistants. It had a tiny monochrome screen, little physical keyboard you had to type with your thumbs or little stylus.
It had what, mere kilobytes of memory?
Literally kilobytes.
Yeah.
And yet he somehow managed to compress a functional medical encyclopedia right into it.
Which, from a purely technical standpoint, is just an astounding feat of early data architecture.
It really is.
He was decades ahead of the curve regarding the digitalization of patient-centered care. He saw the potential for democratizing medical knowledge way before the major tech conglomerates did.
But, and here is where we hit that massive pivot we mentioned, he launches gotosurgeon.com. It's a free educational tool. People can input their symptoms and get a list of possible causes. It's working. But then he deliberately steps on the brakes.
He stops it.
Yeah. And if I'm looking at this through the lens of a modern startup, this makes zero sense. Why abandon that first mover advantage? Why walk away?
Because he recognized a profound flaw in the execution. Not technically, but ethically.
Okay, ethically. How so?
Well, he realized that giving ordinary people raw, unfiltered lists of diseases and symptom combinations without any proper clinical context was actually dangerous.
Dangerous in what way? Like, was the database giving wrong answers?
No, the database was highly accurate. The danger was psychological, which inevitably leads to behavioral danger.
Oh, I see.
Think about the mechanics of how we process information when we are unwell. If you type, say, headache, fatigue, and mild nausea into a raw medical database, the algorithm is going to pull up every possible match, right?
Right.
It will list dehydration and a mild viral infection, but because it lacks human context, it will also list a glioblastoma.
A brain tumor.
Exactly, a deadly brain tumor. It will list early-stage meningitis.
And human nature dictates that we totally ignore the dehydration and immediately lock onto the brain tumor.
Precisely. It creates this massive cascade of hypochondria. The human mind, especially when it's compromised by illness or anxiety, fixates on the catastrophic.
It's like WebMD syndrome before WebMD existed.
Exactly. Dr. Srivatsa saw that providing too many possibilities terrified patients. And this panic wasn't just a mental health issue. It was driving a massive, completely unnecessary burden on the physical healthcare system.
Because they were rushing to the doctor.
Right. Terrified people were rushing to emergency rooms, demanding really expensive MRI scans and broad-spectrum antibiotics for minor viral issues, purely because a raw database had presented them with the absolute worst-case scenario.
Ah, okay. So the tool was functioning exactly as it was programmed to, but it was essentially failing the Hippocratic Oath.
Exactly that. First, do no harm. Releasing a tool that causes widespread public panic and overloads emergency resources is doing harm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Dr. Srivatsa recognized that he was inadvertently contributing to the very problem he wanted to solve. He was increasing the anxiety of the patient and overloading the medical system, so he stopped promoting it.
He just walked away from the money.
He sacrificed what could have been a massive commercial empire out of a deep, conscience-led concern for patient well-being.
That is just incredible ethical restraint. He essentially realized that data without wisdom is basically just a weapon.
That's a great way to put it.
And that realization, I think, bridges us to the evolution of his work. Because he didn't just walk away from digital health entirely. He spent the next few decades refining the logic, trying to build something that provided the wisdom without the terror.
Right, which leads us to Dr. Maya AI and its physical manifestation, the Prima kiosks.
Yes, and we need to be very clear about what Dr. Maya actually is, because it is fundamentally different from a symptom checker that just spits out diseases.
It is entirely different. Dr. Maya AI is not a diagnostic tool. It is not trying to name your disease at all. It is a protective, preventive triage system, and its entire architecture is built around restraint.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that restraint for a second, because the most fascinating feature of Dr. Maya is that it requires the user to input exactly 3 symptoms.
Yes, exactly 3.
Not 2, not 10. Why is 3 the magic number here?
It comes down to clinical triangulation. Let's look at how a doctor's mind works versus how a machine works. If you only provide 1 or 2 symptoms, say fever and cough, that is just too vague.
Right, could be anything.
Exactly. In a medical database, that could map to 500 different conditions. It's just noise. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you allow a patient to input 10 symptoms, they will start listing every minor ache, every little twinge they've felt over the last month.
Yeah, like my knee also kind of hurt on Tuesday.
Right. And then the algorithm gets totally overwhelmed by irrelevant data, and again, it spits out a terrifying, catastrophic list of rare diseases.
So it's kind of like triangulating a cell phone signal. 1 cell tower gives you a massive, unhelpful radius. 2 towers give you a broad overlap. But 3 towers give you a precise, actionable location without needing a military satellite.
That is a perfect analogy. 3 primary symptoms force the patient to identify the absolute core of their distress. It cuts through all the noise. And once those 3 symptoms are inputted, Dr. Maya doesn't give you a disease name.
What does it give you then?
It gives you a color-coded action plan.
Okay, the color codes. Let's talk about those.
Right, so blue means isolate. Red means call an emergency ambulance right now. Yellow or green means this is minor, it's manageable, just hydrate at home.
Notice what is totally absent there.
Yes.
There is no diagnosis. There is no mention of cancer or meningitis or COVID. It simply simulates clinical reasoning to tell you what to do next.
It acts as an intelligent traffic
Oh, I
director.
love that.
Yeah, it's designed to empower the patient with immediate, actionable safety, rather than burdening them with diagnostic terror.
And if we ask why this specific gatekeeper model is so essential right now, we have to look at the macro level medical crisis, don't we?
We do. We have to look at the post-antibiotic era.
Right. This is where Dr. Srivatsa's vision really intersects with global epidemiology, the crisis of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Let's really map out the stakes here for the listener. Antimicrobial resistance is predicted to kill 10 million people annually by the year 2050.
10 million people every year. Let that sink in.
It's an absolute catastrophe.
That is more than the entire population of New York City wiped out every single year just because our antibiotics simply stop working. Superbugs.
It is an existential threat to modern medicine as we know it. If antibiotics fail, you can't do chemotherapy. You can't do C-sections. You can't do basic joint replacements.
Even a minor scrape could be a death sentence.
Exactly. And the really scary part is that the traditional doctor-centered healthcare model actually exacerbates this exact threat.
Walk us through how the current system makes it worse. I think people might find that surprising.
Imagine a standard scenario, right? You have a minor, highly contagious viral infection. Under the current paradigm, you are socially conditioned to believe you need a doctor to validate your illness.
Yeah, you need that doctor's note for work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you leave your house, you travel on public transport, coughing on surfaces, you walk into a local clinic or a hospital, you sit in a crowded, poorly ventilated waiting room for an hour, surrounded by people who might be elderly or immunocompromised or vulnerable.
And you have now just spread a pathogen everywhere.
Right. The waiting room essentially becomes a petri dish.
Oh, that's a grim way to look at it, but it's true.
It is. And then you finally get in to see a junior doctor who is, overworked, exhausted, and has exactly 7 minutes to deal with you.
And you're frustrated you waited so long, right?
Yeah.
You expect a reward for your time. You want a prescription.
Yes. The doctor knows it's likely viral, meaning antibiotics won't do anything, but they are incredibly pressured. To get you out of the room, to make you feel treated, they prescribe a broad-spectrum antibiotic.
Which is literally the absolute worst thing you can do.
Mechanically, it is disastrous.
Yeah.
You take the antibiotic, it doesn't kill the virus, obviously, but it does carpet bomb the natural, healthy bacteria in your gut.
Right.
However, a tiny fraction of bacteria survive because they have a slight genetic mutation. Because you've just wiped out all the competition, those mutated resistant bacteria now multiply rapidly.
Oh, wow. So you have just become an incubator for a superbug.
Yes, and you eventually pass that superbug back into the community.
That is terrifying. So Dr. Maya is specifically designed to break that chain of events.
Yes, exactly. Dr. Maya and the Prima kiosks were built to keep contagious, infected people out of those waiting rooms in the first place.
Ah, I see.
By giving people a calm, objective, color-coded assessment right in their own living room or at a local kiosk, you break the cycle. If they get a green or yellow code, they stay home, they hydrate.
They don't infect the waiting room.
Right. They don't pressure the doctor. And crucially, they don't consume the unnecessary antibiotic. It is a system built to defend humanity against a microscopic threat by changing human behavior at the very first step of illness.
Okay, so we have established the brilliant ethical logic behind the technology itself. But to fully grasp his motivation, like the deep why behind his relentless drive, we have to look past the medical terminology, don't we?
We do. We have to look at his heritage. We really need to explore a Dharma-based interpretation of his work.
And this is where the narrative shifts from a purely medical procedural to, honestly, a deeply philosophical, almost spiritual ethic.
It really does, because if you trace Dr. Srivatsa's lineage, you find he was born into the Kadiyali Brahmin family.
And we're talking about a lineage that goes back over 600 years.
Centuries of continuous history. His ancestors were scholars, they were advisors and protectors of knowledge at the Sringeri Matha.
Wow.
They are intrinsically tied to the Uluru Kartikeya temple. And if you delve into Vedic symbolism, Kartikeya is a vital figure.
Who is Kartikeya, for those who don't know?
He is the divine physician. He is the commander of the celestial armies, the deity of healing, and crucially, the slayer of demons.
The slayer of demons. So if Kartikeya is the demon slayer and Dr. Srivatsa is applying this ancestral heritage to the year 2026, he's not fighting literal mythological monsters with multiple heads, right?
No, he's looking at the intensive care wards.
His demons are microscopic, the demons are the superbugs.
That is exactly the modern translation. The untreatable antimicrobial resistant bacteria that threaten to wipe out millions, are the modern demons. And the concept we must understand to frame his entire life is svadharma.
Svadharma, can you define that?
Svadharma is one's personal inherent duty based on their nature, their skills, and their circumstances.
It's kind of like his spiritual DNA. It's what he was put on this earth to do.
Precisely. For generations, his ancestors protected their communities from ignorance and spiritual decay. Dr. Srivatsa's fight against the modern demons of superbugs, and his fight against the institutional corruption that allows those superbugs to spread unchecked, is a direct modern manifestation of his svadharma.
Wow.
His specific duty is called lokasamgraha.
Lokasamgraha. Break that down for us. What does that actually mean in practice?
It translates roughly to the protection, maintenance, and welfare of the world. It is the sacred duty to hold society together when it threatens to fracture.
When you view his work through this lens, the intention just becomes crystal clear.
Doesn't it? He isn't coding software to get rich. He is building it because his spiritual heritage absolutely demands that he protect the vulnerable from the poison of this impending medical crisis. To do nothing, to just, retire quietly would be a complete violation of his svadharma.
Okay, so his inherent duty is to protect. But let's look at what actually happened when he tried to protect patients within the traditional system. Let's look at the whistleblower battlefield. Because the documents detailing his time in the UK's National Health Service, the NHS, from roughly 2004 to 2013, it is harrowing. It's tough to read.
It really is. It is a textbook case of institutional retaliation. In dharmic terms, it is a profound violation of duty by those in power.
Let's map out the mechanics of this conflict so everyone understands. He was working as a senior doctor and intensive care and pediatric specialist. At this time, the NHS was rolling out these new initiatives called pilot nurse-led practices.
Right, I remember those.
And the goal, from a management perspective, was obviously to save money and increase patient access by having nurses handle frontline triage and treatment instead of doctors. But Dr. Srivatsa, being on the ground, was witnessing absolute tragedy.
He was witnessing systemic failure. The nurses were often entirely untrained for the level of autonomy they were being given. They were essentially forced to operate way beyond their clinical competencies.
And they were operating under strict metrics-driven quotas, like 5-minute consultations just push the patient through.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Exactly. And because of this, they were making terrifying diagnostic errors. He even reported that receptionists were sometimes making clinical decisions.
Receptionists?
Yeah, and this wasn't just theoretical risk. He documented specific, devastating cases.
The most haunting of which is the case of the 14-year-old boy.
Yes. Put yourself in Dr. Srivatsa's shoes that night.
Right.
This 14-year-old boy comes into the emergency department. He is critically ill. But because of the chaotic, mismanaged triage system of this nurse-led practice, his true condition is completely missed.
It's overlooked.
Yeah, he is mismanaged. And that same evening, that young boy died, literally holding Dr. Srivatsa's hand.
It's just heartbreaking.
It is. He also documented cases of patients returning with severe complications, lost organs, permanent damage, all because they were pushed through this factory line model by unqualified staff. So he did exactly what a doctor, bound by both the Hippocratic Oath and his svadharma, is supposed to do.
He blew the whistle.
He blew the whistle. He made a formal, legally protected disclosure to the highest levels of the local health authority, demanding an investigation into these clinical errors.
And how did the massive machinery of the institution respond to a senior physician raising critical safety alarms to protect patients?
They completely turned on him. They didn't investigate the clinical errors at all. According to the legal files, the management actually took his highly confidential complaint and leaked it directly to the very clinic staff he was reporting.
They intentionally weaponized his disclosure to turn his own colleagues against him.
Exactly. They made him a pariah. And that was just the beginning. Over the next several years, the system just tried to crush him. They manufactured 7 overlapping, completely unsubstantiated disciplinary inquiries against him. 7. The goal was to keep him paralyzed in paperwork, defending his own license instead of advocating for patients. But when those inquiries couldn't break him, the institution started breaking its own laws. They committed Caldecott privacy breaches.
We really need to explain the gravity of a Caldecott breach for those outside the UK healthcare system.
Yes, please do.
In 1997, the UK established the Caldecott Guardian system. Every NHS trust has a designated guardian whose sole legal and ethical responsibility is to protect the absolute confidentiality of patient data. It is sacred.
So to breach that?
To breach that is to violate the most fundamental trust in medicine, and the management illegally accessed Dr. Srivatsa's confidential patient records.
Why? What were they looking for?
They weren't looking for medical information. They were on a fishing expedition. They were desperately trying to dig up dirt on him to find any minor clerical error they could use to fire him. They turned the hospital's own privacy apparatus into an offensive weapon against a whistleblower.
Wow. It created an environment so intensely hostile, so toxic, that he actually feared for his physical safety and feared they would fabricate a career-ending accusation against him. He had to stop going to the clinic.
That's how bad it got.
Yeah. And then the institution delivered the final fatal blow, financial starvation. And they did it through a really sneaky bureaucratic mechanism called a TUPE transfer.
Right. Transfer of undertakings, protection of employment.
Exactly. It's supposed to be a law that protects workers when a business is sold. Like if Company A buys Company B, Company A has to honor the employee contracts. But the NHS management weaponized it. They essentially outsourced his employment contract and all the legal liabilities of his whistleblower case to a small, private, shell-like company.
So they just washed their hands of him.
Exactly. Once he was transferred out of the NHS infrastructure, they suspended his salary, they froze his pension, they cut off all his resources. He couldn't pay his mortgage, he lost his home. By 2013, this brilliant, dedicated ICU physician was left completely destitute and actually had to return to India.
It is just a devastating sequence of events. And it brings us to one of the most difficult yet most vital philosophical concepts in the Bhagavad Gita, Nishkama Karma.
Nishkama karma. Action without attachment to the results.
Yes. And to really understand this, we have to look at the setting of the Bhagavad Gita. It takes place on the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
Right.
The great warrior Arjuna drops his bow. He is completely paralyzed by the impending destruction, by the fact that he has to fight his own teachers and relatives. He doesn't want to act. And Lord Krishna, serving as his charioteer, delivers the core teaching of Karma Yoga.
And what does he tell him?
He tells Arjuna that he must fight because it is his righteous duty, his dharma, to oppose adharma or corruption. But crucially, he must completely detach himself from the fruits of the battle.
He can't fight for a reward.
Exactly. He cannot fight for the glory of winning, and he cannot refuse to fight out of the fear of losing or dying or the tragedy it will cause. The action itself is the only thing he controls.
So if we map that battlefield onto Dr. Srivatsa's life, his Kurukshetra was the NHS.
Exactly. Dr. Srivatsa's duty, his svadharma, was to speak the truth. It was to report the clinical errors that killed that 14-year-old boy. It was to build a safe, preventative alternative, which eventually became Dr. Maya. The fact that the NHS crushed him, that the General Medical Council suspended him, that he lost his home, his career, and his pension, those are the fruits. They are the results of his action. Dharma required him to have the ethical courage to act, to protect the vulnerable, regardless of whether it led to systemic reform in a medal or his own absolute ruin.
Wow.
He performed his duty. The institution's corrupt retaliatory response is their negative karma, not his. His conscience remains clean.
Okay, I hear that. I see the profound philosophical beauty in that. I really do. I see the incredible life-altering sacrifice he made. And I have to push back here.
Sure.
Because if I read his recent writings, if I look at his blogs, his transcripts, his social media, he's clearly frustrated.
He's undeniably frustrated, yes.
He is openly, sometimes aggressively, criticizing the World Health Organization, the NHS, massive philanthropists, and governance. He's constantly pointing out that major publications like the Times of India wrote about his work in 2016, and yet the institutions completely ignored it.
Right.
He is visibly upset that they aren't adopting Dr. Maya. So help me reconcile this. If he is truly practicing Nishkama Karma, if he's achieved total spiritual detachment from the results of his actions, why is he writing angry blogs about being ignored? Doesn't wanting these massive institutions to recognize his tool, to validate his genius, imply a deep ego-driven desire for praise?
That is a brilliant pushback, and it actually addresses a very common misunderstanding of both Dharma and human mechanics. We must carefully unpack the difference here between craving recognition to feed the ego and seeking institutional recognition for the sake of public health scale.
Scale versus ego. Break that down for me.
Craving recognition for ego looks very specific in the tech and medical world, right?
Yeah.
It looks like demanding your name in large brass letters on a hospital wing. It looks like holding a patent hostage until a venture capital firm offers a multi-million-dollar buyout. It looks like hiding life-saving technology behind expensive paywalls and exclusive licensing agreements until you get your price and your applause.
Right, that's classic ego.
Exactly. Dr. Srivatsa isn't doing any of that. He is essentially offering the baseline triage technology for free. He is building solar-powered kiosks for villages. That is not the behavior of an egomaniac seeking a payout.
So if he doesn't want the money or the brass plaque, why does he care so much if the WHO ignores him? Why does he need their validation?
Because a life-protecting system cannot serve the masses if it is hidden in obscurity. We are talking about preventing an antimicrobial pandemic that could kill 10 million people a year.
You can't do that quietly.
No, you cannot fight a global, systemic, multi-continent threat with a localized, unendorsed indie app running on a few dozen smartphones. To actually protect a society, which is his Dharma, the tool must be integrated into pharmacies, hospital networks, public health infrastructure, and government triage protocols.
Ah, I see. He doesn't need the WHO's logo on his website to stroke his ego. He needs their global distribution network to fulfill the tool's dharmic purpose. The tool is useless if the people who need it most don't know it exists or don't trust it.
Exactly. And let's use the Bhagavad Gita to clarify another really vital point about detachment. Detachment from results does not mean inaction. It does not mean apathy.
It doesn't mean you just build the app, throw it on the Google Play Store, shrug your shoulders and say, well, the universe will provide. Whatever happens, happen.
Right. That is fatalism, not karma yoga. True nishkama karma means you aggressively, passionately, and sincerely advocate for the truth. You fight tirelessly for the usefulness of your contribution. You write the blogs, you pitch the NGOs, you build the kiosks.
You put in the work.
Yes, but, and this is the razor's edge, you do not let the inevitable rejections, the bureaucratic delays, the institutional silence, or the total lack of applause destroy your original intention. You do not let the world's indifference turn you into a bitter cynic who just stops trying.
You keep holding out the solution, even if the world keeps slapping your hand away.
You hold it out because holding it out is your duty. Whether they take it or not is their karma. Your peace comes from knowing you offered the cure.
Okay, but let's do an honest assessment here. Because the evidence demands we look at this truthfully, not just philosophically.
Fair enough.
If the intention is so remarkably pure and the technology, this color-coded, 3-symptom AI that prevents waiting room infections, is so vital for the post-antibiotic era, why isn't it everywhere? Why did that 2016 Times of India article result in basically zero systemic change? Why aren't millions of people downloading the Dr. Maya app right now?
To answer that, we have to really separate the absolute purity of his intention from the practical effectiveness of his execution.
Right.
Being a visionary intensive care physician and a spiritually grounded warrior does not automatically make you a master of modern consumer psychology or
No.
digital marketing or app onboarding.
No, those are entirely different skill sets. There's a brilliant analogy he uses in one of his own YouTube videos that I think perfectly captures the friction here. He calls it the toffee analogy.
Oh, yes. It is a profound metaphor for the culture of dependence.
He says, imagine he is holding out a perfectly crafted toffee, a piece of candy. But this toffee has the power to protect you and your children from a coming medical crisis. He has spent 50 years perfecting the recipe. He holds it out to you for free, and you refuse to take it.
Just stare at it.
Yeah. You don't take it not because you don't need it, not because it costs too much, but because you have been trained since birth to believe that anything this important, anything related to your health, must come from a massive institution.
Right.
It must come with a prescription pad, a white coat, and a waiting room. If a single man holds it out, you view it with complete suspicion.
What's fascinating here is that he is describing systemic behavioral conditioning.
Yeah.
To understand why people won't download the app, we have to look at the whole history of medical dependency. If you go back to the 19th century, healthcare was largely patient-centered and community-driven. Families handled basic triage.
It's very localized.
But moving into the 20th century, particularly after reforms like the Flexner Report in the US and the establishment of massive national systems like the NHS in the UK, medicine became hyper-institutionalized.
The birth of the mega hospital. The whole doctor is God complex.
Precisely. For generations, we have been thoroughly brainwashed into a doctor-centered model. We've been told our bodies are incredibly complex, mysterious machines that only highly certified, institutionally backed mechanics can possibly understand.
Wow, yeah.
We have been completely stripped of our medical agency. So explaining a brand new, preventative, patient-centered, self-triage model to ordinary people is incredibly difficult. It requires them to unlearn decades of conditioning. It requires them to take agency for their own triage, which is genuinely terrifying for someone who is used to being a passive consumer of healthcare.
Right. They're literally waiting for permission to heal.
Ah.
But there's another massive barrier the evidence highlights, and it's a critique of the messaging
The
itself.
messaging, yes.
When I read a lot of the public-facing material for Dr. Maya, the blogs, the website copy, the book descriptions, it is heavily, heavily focused on the terror of the situation.
The fear-based framing.
Yes. The messaging is constantly hitting the user with these apocalyptic statistics. 10 million deaths by 2050. The total collapse of modern medicine. Silent microbial executioners. Deep institutional corruption.
It's intense.
It is. Now, to be clear, the epidemiological data entirely backs him up. It is factually true. But psychologically, put yourself in the shoes of a mother at 2 a.m. Her toddler has a spiking fever. She is exhausted and terrified. She downloads an app hoping for guidance, and the first thing she reads is a manifesto about the apocalyptic collapse of the global antibiotic supply chain and the corruption of the WHO.
She is gonna panic.
She might just delete the app and drive to the emergency room anyway, which defeats the entire purpose.
This is a critical insight into user friction. While the geopolitical and epidemiological reality of superbugs is genuinely terrifying, fear paralyzes the general public.
It makes them freeze.
Fear-based framing makes people want to hide. It makes them seek the familiar comfort of the broken system they already know, rather than adopt a new technology they don't understand.
There is also the issue of trust and the missing institutional stamps of approval, which is kind of the ultimate tragic irony of Dr. Srivatsa's story. Because he is a whistleblower, because he sacrificed his career to expose the medical establishment, he lacks the official NHS or WHO logos on his website.
It is the paradox of the prophet. The very institutions he exposes as corrupt, the institutions that destroyed his career, are the exact same institutions the public unconsciously relies upon for validation.
Right.
When an ordinary citizen looks at a health app, they instinctively scan for that blue NHS logo or the WHO emblem. If it's not there, trust plummets. Furthermore, a digital health app requires more than just an internet connection and good logic to gain traction. It needs a seamless, incredibly simple user interface. It needs to speak the language of immediate comfort, not just high-level epidemiological warnings.
So we have this incredible, pure, dharmic intention, but it is smashing into these massive practical, psychological, and institutional walls. Which brings us to the future. How do we realign this mission?
That's the big question.
Yeah, if you are Dr. Srivatsa, or if you are someone carrying this vital work forward, what is the practical, spiritually grounded advice on how to continue? How do you keep fighting without falling into the trap of bitterness over this painfully slow adoption?
Well, the first most crucial step is a strategic shift in messaging. We must shift from the language of fear to the language of empowerment.
What does that look like in practice, like on the actual screen?
It means strictly compartmentalizing the communication. Keep the complex, fear-heavy vocabulary of antimicrobial catastrophe and systemic collapse for the policy papers, the medical journals, and the grant applications. That is where that data belongs.
So keep it for the experts.
Yeah. Right. But for the everyday, public-facing materials, the App Store description, the kiosk interface, the focus must be purely on peace of mind. Frame Dr. Maya not as a shield against a doomed, corrupt healthcare system, but as a wise, comforting companion for that worried parent at 2 a.m.
I love that.
The messaging should be, you are safe. We are listening. Here is what your body is saying. Here is your simple color code. You've got this.
Calm authority. It de-escalates the panic entirely. But even if you fix the messaging, the toffee analogy tells us that digital adoption is still incredibly hard. And the sources point to a brilliant physical solution he developed that bypasses the App Store entirely. The Prima kiosks.
The microeconomy model. This is where his vision truly shines in its practical application, particularly for the developing world.
Let's describe the Prima kiosk personal resource emergency medical advice. It is essentially a healthcare ATM.
That's a great way to visualize it.
It's designed to be placed in rural villages or local pharmacies. It is solar-powered, so it works completely off the grid. It is voice-first, meaning you don't need to be literate or own a smartphone to use it.
Yeah.
It speaks 22 different Indian dialects.
It's incredibly accessible.
But the absolute genius of it isn't just the hardware. It's the human element, the Maya advocates.
The local champion.
Yes. Instead of trying to force a faceless AI onto a skeptical public, these kiosks are designed to be run by local women's self-help groups or respected retired community members.
The Maya advocates act as the human bridge to the AI. Think of them like UN interpreters. You have this massive, complex, highly accurate AI logic on one side, and you have a terrified, possibly uneducated patient on the other.
And the advocate bridges that gap.
Exactly. If someone is scared of the machine, the advocate holds their hand, speaks to them in their local dialect, and gently guides them through the three-symptom triage.
It rebuilds trust from the ground up.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the ultimate strategic realignment. The advice would be, stop fighting the giant institutions that refuse to listen. Stop waiting for the WHO or the NHS to validate your truth. Their bureaucratic machinery is too slow and too compromised.
So bypass them entirely.
Focus entirely on grassroots, community-by-community adoption. Let the local pharmacists, the women's self-help groups, and the kiosk operators be your proof of concept. Build a localized economy of care that operates completely beneath the radar of the massive institutions.
And philosophically, doing that requires fully re-embracing Nishkama karma, doesn't it?
It really does. It requires returning to the pure, unadulterated joy of the work itself. Build the kiosks, train the women to be advocates, speak the truth to whoever will listen in the village square, but fully, entirely, release the timeline.
Release the timeline. That is profound.
You must release it. If the world adopts this technology tomorrow and you save 10 million lives, wonderful. If the institutions ignore it for another 50 years until the sheer, undeniable scale of the superbug crisis forces their hand and a new generation finally pulls Dr. Srivatsa's blueprints off the dusty shelf to save themselves, that is also fine.
The work still matters.
The Dharma remains intact, the duty was performed, the value of the work is not diminished in the slightest by the world's delay in understanding it.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you listening. The true measure of value. When we look back at this entire sweeping journey, from a celebrated life-saving ICU doctor to a vilified and financially ruined whistleblower sleeping in his car to a digital pioneer trying to save the very system that rejected him, it forces us to completely reevaluate how we judge success in our society.
In the modern, tech-driven world, we mistakenly measure the value of an innovation by its metrics. We look at its download count on the App Store, the millions in venture capital funding it secured, the sleekness of its marketing campaign, or the industry awards the founder gathers. But through the lens of the ancient wisdom we've discussed today, those metrics are illusions. They are Maya. The true value of Dr. Kadiyali Srivatsa's contribution is measured by the absolute purity of its intention. It is measured by the immense ethical courage required to endure a decade of persecution without ever surrendering his Hippocratic oath.
That's powerful.
It is measured by the relentless, quiet, daily effort to protect human life, even when humanity isn't paying attention.
It's an incredible, complex legacy, a story of high technology and ancient duty. And it leaves us with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. We spend so much time these days, with the rapid rise of artificial intelligence, worrying about the future. We wonder if technology will eventually replace our humanity. Will the algorithms make us obsolete? But looking at Dr. Srivatsa's journey and the creation of Dr. Maya, perhaps the real question is entirely different.
Perhaps it is.
Perhaps the real question is whether we have the courage to use technology to reclaim the humanity, the intuition, and the free will that massive bureaucratic institutions have already quietly taken from us. When you're unwell, when you are standing in those murky diagnostic waters, waiting for a massive system to tell you what your own body is already screaming, what would happen to your own life if you stopped waiting for permission to heal?